Hey guys, welcome back to another video in the Java series. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to do if statements. Alright guys, I'm back. This is a very exciting episode because we're going to do something that's going to allow us to make our programs much more complex than they normally are. So normally we execute our code from top to bottom, right? We start at the main method here, and then it runs the first line of code and goes on and on and on until there's no more code left, and that's the end of the program. Very simple, nothing else to it. There's not really much complexity. So to make our programs more complex, we can do something called branching or selection statements, which are a part of control flow, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So essentially, what if statements allow us to do is we can say, let's say we have a variable called my age, and it represents my age. And we can have an if statement that says, if my age is equal to 20, then run a piece of code. If it's not equal to 20, then run another piece of code. So the program is allowed to branch in different directions, just like a tree branch, Not really the best analogy, but kinda. But you'll see why it's called branches in a second, because a branch often has many different, directions that it goes, not just two. With if statements, we can make really complex, amounts of branches. We can have like 4 or 5 branches, as many as we need. So we can create quite a complex part in our program that allows us to execute code differently depending on the conditions of our program. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started. Let me give you some actual concrete examples. So first, let's just write it out. If statements, a way to run code conditionally. So let's see how we can make our first if statement. Let me show you the anatomy of an if statement. So you start off by doing if. So if is a keyword in Java, meaning it's reserved and you can only use it for this purpose. You cannot make a variable called if, for example. And then you have parentheses after the if, and inside the parentheses you put a condition, or something that evaluates to true or false. So if you want to, you can literally put true, or you can put false. But normally you would want to put a condition. So for example, so we'll just write condition for now before we actually show you a real example. And then what you want to do then is open it up by putting a opening curly bracket and then press enter, and then IntelliJ IDEA is going to complete it by putting a closing curly bracket. And this little section that we have here is called a block of code, or in this case it would be the branch of the if statement, one of the branches. So anytime you see something surrounded by opening and closing curly brackets in Java or even other programming languages, it's called a block of code. And it's actually very important to know that for a few different reasons that we'll explore later. So anything inside of this block of code here will be run only if this condition is true. All right, simple enough. So code will be run if this condition evals to true. Okay, simple enough. Let me go ahead and show you an actual example though. So let's do what we did a second ago. Let's have a variable called my age. So integer my age, and I'm currently 20 years old, so I'll put 20. So let's have another one called required age. So integer required age is also equal to 20. So they're equal to each other. And now let's have an if statement. So we'll say in this if statement, if my age is equal to the required age, say you are cool. Okay, let's see if we can do that. So if my age is equal to required age, then run the code inside of here. So the code that we're going to have inside of here is just s out, so we can print out something to the console. We can say, wow, you are really cool. And that's correct, I am really cool. So simple enough, I hope you understand this. This is actually using what we learned last episode, which is conditions and Boolean conditions and all that stuff. So this will simply evaluate to true or false depending on if these two things are equal. In this case, it'll evaluate to true because of course 20 is equal to 20. The variables have the same value. So it should print out, wow, you are really cool. Let's go ahead and see that in the console. If we run this, so it's running now. And boom, it says, wow, you are really cool. And of course, it's gonna highlight here. If you're using IntelliJ, it'll say condition my age is equal to required age is always true, which is true. This is not like a dynamic program. We're not having these variables change as the program runs. It's not randomized or anything like that. So these variables will always have the same value, meaning that this if statement will always run this code here. Now, for the sake of this example and the sake of this program, it doesn't really matter. It's just IntelliJ trying to help you in case you are working on a more complex program. because normally your variables will be changing over time or be different depending on the conditions of the program. So don't worry about this at all. It's really nothing. So you only really need to worry about, what IntelliJ is telling you if it's red, if it's underlined in red, okay? You guys want to see my cat? Let me show you my cat. He's a big boy. He's a big boy. Hey, don't sit on my mouse, motherfucker. Hey! Now just for the sake of practice, let me go ahead and make a different one here. So let's say that, you're at a bar and the bar requires you to be 21 years old to get inside the bar, because the drinking age in America is 21, but I think you can still go inside of a bar. I don't know. I'm not a party animal. So let's make a simple program that if the person is over the age or equal to 21 years old, then they can enter the bar. Otherwise, they cannot. Okay? So let's try that out. See if you can try that out yourself using what I taught you so far. See what you can figure out. Okay? Let me do it. So let's go ahead and set the required age to 21 because that is the required age, like I said. And so we can do if my age is greater than or equal to required age, then we'll say you can enter the bar, okay? And then we also want to tell them that they cannot enter the bar if they are not greater than or equal to the required age. So we'll have another one that says if my age is less than the required age, we'll say you cannot enter the bar. So here we go. So now we have two different if statements. The reason that we have another one right after this one is because this one will never run if the condition is false, right? And this one will run if the condition is true. And there's no way that both of them can be false just because of the way that we have it set up. It cannot be both greater than or equal to and less than, right? That doesn't make sense unless we're reassigning the variable in between, right? So let's go ahead and run this, and we should get the second one. You cannot enter the bar because we are 20, not 21 or older. There we go. So we get you cannot enter the bar. Perfect. But now let me show you a different way you can do this, a more efficient way, I guess, and it takes less code. So instead of having two different if statements here, starting with if, what you can do is have an else on the end of this. So else. So this is another keyword, else, and then open it up with a new branch. And then inside of here, put the code and delete this one. And the way this works is essentially if this first condition is false for the core if statement condition, this else branch will run only if the first one is false, okay? So now if we run this, we should get the same output because this one's still going to be false. So that means that this one has to run because the else runs if the first one's false. So it says you cannot enter the bar. Perfect. So an else makes a lot of sense, right? It's more concise than having two different if statements. It makes logical sense. So else means otherwise. So if this, then this. So else, if else. Okay. And yeah, so that's how you can use an else statement. So if we want to, we can use the previous example and do 20 again. And we can say if my age is equal to the required age. And it says wow, you are really cool. And then otherwise, if you are not cool, then it'll say you suck. Or if you're not equal to the required age, you suck. So let's go ahead and run this and see what the result is. Should be that I'm really cool. So I'm still really cool. Awesome. And if we want to, just keep in mind that conditions don't always have to involve variables. They can also just use literals, so like an actual number. So instead of saying my age is equal to the required age, we can literally say my age is equal to 20. So that's another thing we can do if we want to. So just be aware of that. As you start to make your own programs, you'll see that you'll learn the nuances like this. Now let me show you how to make if statements with multiple conditions. So far we can make a if statement with one single condition, technically two conditions because we have the else here, but we can explicitly have multiple conditions if we want to using an if or else if statement, okay? So let's see how we can do that. So we'll do if my age is less than 18, then we can say you are a minor. Okay, simple enough. And then we can have an else. Else, we can say you are an adult. Simple enough, okay? But let's say we want to make this a little more complex. Let's say we want to have conditions in between the first condition and the else condition, or the else branch, okay? So we can do else if, meaning that it's another condition upon the first condition. And then we can put inside of here, we can do whatever we want. We can say if my age is greater than or equal to 18 and my age is less than 70. So in this case, we have two conditions right here tied together to equal one condition. So you have this condition evaluates to true or false, this one evaluates to true or false, and the AND operator will spit out true or false depending on if these are true, if they're both true. They have to both be true for these for this whole condition to be true, okay? So there we can just output you are an adult. Now let's add another condition onto it if we want to. We can add as many as we need, really. Else if my age is greater than or equal to 70 and my age is less than 100. We can say S out, you are getting really old. And then finally, let's add an else onto the end of this, because usually for your conditions, there are circumstances where all of them could be false. So this means that if all of them are false, then the else will run. Okay? So in this case, we can say, well, let's think about what we would want to say here, because if all of these are false, this means that they're not less than 18, they're not between 18 and 70, they're not between 70 and 100. That means that they're older than 100 years old or equal to 100 years old. So then we could say, wow, you are still alive? Something like that, since they're really freaking old in this case. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this before I explain it more, and let's see what the output is. It says you are an adult because I am indeed an adult, so my age is equal to 20, and 20 is satisfying this condition here. Okay, so the way this works is it goes from top to bottom, one condition at a time. So if this first condition is true, it's going to run the code inside of the condition, and then it will not run any of the other conditions or the else, okay? So these are only going to be run if the one before it is false, and the else will only run if all of these are false. So just to reiterate, this first condition was false because my age does not hold a value less than 18. So then it went to this else if condition here. So the second condition is said if my age is greater than or equal to 18, that's true. And then it said if my age is less than 70, that's true. So this entire thing evaluates it true, and therefore it satisfied the condition, or the if statement was happy, so it printed out you are an adult. And since this one was true, it's not going to run any of the other conditions or the else statement, so nothing else will print out or even be evaluated at all. And there you go. You can make it as complex as you want. You can add as many conditions as you want. You can do whatever you need to do for your program to run. Obviously, this is a very simple example just because we have one single line of code for each of these branches here. But realistically, in your real programs, when you start coding out more complex programs, your branches are going to contain, many lines of code, if not tons of lines of code, okay? And we'll see that later. We'll make some example programs for sure in the series. Now, hopefully you understand this is kind of revolutionary, right? Like for us, like beginner programmer, I'm not a beginner, but for you guys who are beginners who've never programmed before, this is your first programming language. This is a really cool and revolutionary idea, right? Normally we can only do really simple programs that only do one thing, like top to bottom, one thing at a time, simple, very, very simple. And they never change really unless you actually recode it. In this case, the program can execute differently depending on the conditions of the program, so it can take different directions. If it's a car, it can go in different lanes, and that's how your program runs now because you have conditions. And we're going to learn about many different ways that we can control the flow, the way that the program executes for our program, okay? So that's called a control flow, controlling how your program executes. An if statement is only one of those statements. It's called a selection statement, and there's actually another selection statement we're going to learn about next episode called a switch statement. Now, there's something else called nested if statements. So nested if statements. And that's really simple. It's the concept of having an if statement inside of another if statement. And you can have many different layers. You don't have to have one if statement inside of one if statement. You can have an if statement inside of an if statement, inside of an if statement, inside of an if statement. It actually happens sometimes. So that's something that happens, and this is called nesting. So having an if statement inside of another if statement looks good, okay? And this is not unique to if statements. You can do this with loops, which we're going to learn about later. So pretty cool concept. Let me go ahead and show you how you can use it. So let's just go ahead and change this this tree branch here. Let me go ahead and show you how you can make it different using nesting. So in this case, we're printing out you are an adult if they're between 18 and 70. So let me just go ahead and cut this with Control X, and then we'll make a new if statement inside of this, and we'll say if my age is equal to 20. So we're explicitly saying if it's equal to 20, then go ahead and print out you are an adult. That is 20. And then let's have an else on that. And we'll just say you are an adult. Perfect. So let's go ahead and run this before I explain it. Let me just see the output. Okay, it says you are an adult that is 20. So the way that this works is pretty much the same exact way. I'm sure you can guess. So first it's going to check this condition. It's false, so it's not going to run the branch here or the code block. And then it's going to go to the second condition here, and it's going to be true because we have not changed anything. It's between 18 and 70. And then it's going to run all of the code within this block of code here, okay? And within this block of code happens to be another if statement that checks to see if my age is equal to 20, and it is 20, so it's going to run this code here. If it wasn't 20, then it would run this code here. So it's the same exact thing. An if statement with an if statement. So that's called nesting. And if you want to, you can have more conditions, many conditions. So you can add another one if you wanted to. That said, if my age is equal to 21, yeehaw, something like that, right? That's called nesting. Okay, so a lot of if statements so far. Pretty cool stuff. I hope you like it so far. Let me show you one more thing you can do with if statements, and that's called single line if statements. So essentially, let me just go ahead and reverse what we did here. Just cut this, boom, chicka boom. And what we're doing here is each of these code blocks here are one line, right? Like I said before, so they're very, very simple. And in circumstances in which you have one single statement within the code of an if statement or the code of a branch of an if statement, what you can do is actually remove the curly brackets themselves. So you can just remove it. And now this does the same exact thing. So you can only do this when it's one statement. If there's multiple statements, let's say you have another S out, it's not going to work how you want it to work. See, it's telling you what the hell is going on, why are you doing that? So in this case, we would have to re-add the code block and move this inside of it, right? So what we can do is just remove each of the code blocks or the curly brackets from each of these. Boom, boom, boom. And now it looks a little more concise. I personally, why is it doing that? Oh, there we go. Get rid of that one. So I personally don't really like this, but some people find it more concise and more readable, or they like it better. But I think, just for how my brain works, I don't think it's as readable as having the code blocks or the curly brackets, on each of the branches. But that's really up to you, how you want to do it. But you won't see me doing this, so you can do it if you want to, okay? And you can even nest it if you want to, if you really want to, which is freaking weird. If you're a weirdo, you can do if my age is equal to 20, then go ahead and do S out, you are 20. And then you can have the else, you are not 20. So it'll work the same way. Boom. And if you want to, if you're even weirder, if you're a freaking freak, you can move this onto that line. So they're all on one line pretty much. Just due to the way that Java works is you don't really need to have everything on different lines. As long as it's, denoted or terminated by a semicolon, you can stack statements one on another. So there you go. That's still valid. So if you're freaking crazy, you can do that if you want to. So there you go. But anyway, that's how you can do single line if statements if you want to. And that's the last thing I want to show you about if statements. So next episode, like I said, we're going to learn about a different control flow statement, a different selection control flow statement called switch statements, which actually are very, 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 very similar to if statements. And they're less used, but they're still very much important for your programs. So stay tuned, okay? But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I want to say that there is a written article for this episode. If you're interested, check it out in the description below so you can see it. I've written everything out. All of the code is there. I've explained it. I explained the code in detail, my thoughts on if statements, some more concepts that maybe I didn't explain in this video, but I tried to. So check out my article. If you like it, leave a star or something like that. Leave a comment. So link in the description below, as well as the link for the code. But anyway, in this episode, you learned how to do if statements, how to make basic if statements, how to have else's on your if statements, how to have multiple conditions on your if statements using else if, how to have single line if statements, and finally, how to do nested if statements. So a lot of cool stuff that you should be practicing. So go ahead and open up your IDE if it's not open already, if you weren't coding with me, and practice making some basic programs using if statements, okay, before you go to the next episode. Alright, so that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. In the description below, I'll leave a link to the code for this episode so you can check it out. You can bookmark it, come back to it later. If you forget any concepts or you just want to review the concepts I taught in this video, I'll mark everything up with comments so you can come back and read the code without having to rewatch the video, although your reviews are greatly appreciated. So yeah, I'll leave a link for that in the description below, so make sure to check it out. And another thing is I'll leave a link to our Discord server. It's a big community for programmers. You can ask for help on your programming projects if you're stuck on something, or maybe you can get some new friends. If you don't have any friends, there's lots of people here. It's growing really fast. You can find lots of people who are passionate about the same things as you. For example, if you like Minecraft Spigot development, you can find lots of people who like that. If you like C++, if you like Java, if you like web development, it's a really, really big programming community. So feel free to join. There's a link for that in the description below. And the last thing I want to tell you is that if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month, and you can cancel at any time. You get some cool perks like early access to all of my new videos, a cool rank on my Discord server like you see right here on the side, YouTube members, and also you get to see yourself on the screen like you see right now. So if that sounds cool to you, feel free to join. If you don't want to, that's fine. If you can't, that's okay too. I really just appreciate you watching the video anyway. And thank you. Thanks a lot. And that's it. So if you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And peace.